A cheating wife who abandoned me during my hospitalization now seeks forgiveness after 12 long years. Hi, I'm Jason M., 47. I want to share a life incident here to get some advice. This goes back 12 years when I was married to Susan, my first wife. We had been married for 7 years and had 2 children, Laura and Lucas, who were 5 and 3 at the time. We were leading a regular life until one fateful day. One morning, while driving to my office, a speeding vehicle from the opposite direction rammed into my car. The next thing I remember is waking up in a hospital bed, covered in bandages and plasters. The nurse informed me that I had woken up after 2 days in a coma. I thanked my doctor for saving my life, grateful for the new chance. Little did I know about the disaster that was about to unfold. After a week of treatment, my doctor informed me that my lower body was paralyzed and I might never walk again. I was shattered. Susan broke down at this news. It was evidently difficult for her because she had to manage the house and the children alone. I fell into depression, unable to comprehend my life in a wheelchair. I spent my days staring at the empty walls of my hospital room, cursing how my life had turned upside down. I dreaded that I would never be able to play soccer with my children, dance with my wife, or feel free again. To add to my misery, Susan stopped visiting me. Initially, she brought the children thrice a week, and those moments with my family were the only ones I lived for. But as the days passed, her visits became scarce. I pleaded with her to bring the children, but she would say they didn't want to see me. I felt hopeless. Then, one day, she handed me divorce papers, saying she couldn't spend her life with a handicapped man. I'm still young and desirable. I deserve a normal man, she said. I sensed the upcoming separation when she started giving me cold shoulders, but I didn't expect it to be so soon. A month after my accident, friends informed me they had seen Susan with a middle-aged man, probably in his 50s, at cafes and malls. Some claimed she had an affair even before my accident, while others said her desperation led her to this man after my accident. Barely 2 months after my accident, before I was discharged, she handed me divorce papers. I was flustered, devastated, and heartbroken, wheelchair-bound, destitute, and divorced, with no income or savings. Luckily, I had insurance that covered my hospital bills to some extent. I had to liquidate my savings for the remaining expenses, leaving me with nothing. After being discharged, I moved to my parents' house. I was 35, divorced, with no income, and dependent on my old mother physically and financially. My mother was a florist, running a small shop. The little income from the shop and her pension kept her expenses afloat. With limited resources, she supported me. It was troubling for a 35-year-old man to depend on a 62-year-old mother. Soon after my discharge, I went to meet my children. When I reached my house, it was locked. Neighbors told me Susan had moved to her lover's house with the children. According to them, Susan's lover was a fat, old man who had been divorced thrice, but was wealthy and childless. Some even labeled Susan a gold digger. I managed to get the address of her boyfriend and reached his house. When I arrived, Susan didn't let me meet my children, saying they had already adjusted to her boyfriend and calling him daddy. She threatened me with a restraining order when I insisted on meeting them. I couldn't afford a lawyer, so I backed off. Less than 6 months after my accident, and only a few months after my divorce, she was already living with another man. I felt disgusted. I asked her how she could abandon me and move on so quickly. She belittled me, saying I was a burden in her life. I asked if she cheated on me before the divorce, because our divorce had been settled a month ago and she was already living with her lover. She retorted that it was none of my business, and told me never to show my face again. I left with teary eyes, feeling defeated and humiliated. I cried in front of my mother, who consoled me and motivated me to take charge of my life. I joined my mother in her shop, helping her make bouquets, serve customers, and clean. I realized the business had potential to grow, but my mother was too fragile to do it herself. I pulled out old contacts to secure contracts with event management companies to supply flowers at events. Gradually, I built a team, took contracts for venue decorations, and eventually launched my own event management company. It took 12 long years to rebuild my life. My mother had my back all the while, supporting and motivating me. A year after my accident, I learned Susan was leaving the city with my children and her lover. I rushed to meet them, but they had already left by the time I arrived. I tried to reach out to my children multiple times, but Susan insulted me and chased me away every time. Susan had full custody of the children and could decide everything for them. I couldn't contest joint custody because I was physically and financially challenged. I couldn't challenge her restraining order either, as I was too broke to hire a lawyer while Susan had a wealthy boyfriend. In the last 12 years, whenever I got leads on my children, I traveled to meet them but failed every time. Susan threatened to get me arrested as her boyfriend had the money and contacts to get away with anything. By the way, that man didn't marry Susan even after 12 years, although they lived together. A year ago, I finally filed for joint custody. I was waiting eagerly for my event management business to stabilize. I filed for custody and finally managed to get 15 days with my children. They are flying to my house next week. Although Susan did her best to object to my plea in court, I hired a good lawyer who presented my case well, and I got 15 days. Besides, my children are grown-ups now and were asked if they wanted to meet me. They affirmed a yes. I know I can't compensate for the last 12 years, but I wish to spend quality time with them. As the time nears, I am feeling nervous and delighted. They are 17 and 15 now. I hope they are not mean and toxic. I don't know what story Susan has told them in the last 12 years. Should I tell them the truth about their mother? Do you have any suggestions on how to approach them? I'm super nervous and excited. Update 1. Hi all, I have quite an update. I missed 2 critical pieces of information in my original post. First, about my current wife, Amy. Yes, I remarried a beautiful woman 5 years ago. Amy is an interior designer. I met her at an event where she was designing the wedding venue, and we were providing the flowers. I was yet to start my own company at that time. It wasn't love at first sight, but we vibed well. We kept meeting at events and became friends. She was a single mother of a 3-year-old daughter. The idea of starting the event management company was hers, as she had the contacts and knowledge of the business. I partnered with her to launch the business. We dated for a year before getting married. Now, we live as a happy family of 4. Amy, her daughter Mia, my mother, and me. Her daughter was delighted to get a granny, and so was my mother. The second information is regarding accident compensation. I was hit by a speeding truck, so ideally I should have been compensated by the logistics company owning the truck. But at that time, the company got away with paying nothing by manipulating the facts about the accident and pinning the blame on me. I couldn't hire a good lawyer back then, so I didn't get a penny. Big companies pay their attorneys a lot to save their backs. After my marriage with Amy, she suggested I refile the case since we could afford a suitable lawyer. The case is still in court, but my lawyer has hinted that the judgment will come in our favor. All right, back to my story. As I mentioned, 3 months ago, my children were supposed to visit me after 12 years of my divorce. I was excited and nervous, but Amy calmed me down and supported me. I went to pick them up from the airport. Laura is 15 now, and Lucas is 13. They have grown into beautiful and handsome teenagers. After the initial greetings, we ran out of conversations. It was awkward for all 3 of us on our way home. I tried to break the ice by asking about their school life. I deliberately avoided mentioning their mother, and they didn't bring her up either. The children were unusually silent, maybe looking for an opportunity to plug into their earphones like any other teenager. Upon reaching home, we were welcomed by Amy. The children looked shocked as if they didn't anticipate this. I don't know why Amy was a surprise to them when their mother could live with another man within months of our divorce. Amy had set up the guest room for the children. We had lunch together, and Amy laid out the vacation itinerary we had planned. They gave a neutral reaction to everything, neither excited nor dismissive. Amy and I were confused by their mixed response. They locked themselves up in their room. Soon after, I got a call from Susan accusing me of tricking our children. She said I brought them to my house to manipulate them. She threatened me not to show Amy and my mother's face to my children. I kept my phone on speaker so Amy could listen too. Amy then suggested a bold plan. I should expose Susan's reality to the children. She assured me it would work and volunteered to lead the conversation. When the children joined us for dinner, Amy initiated the discussion by showing our wedding pictures. Laura and Lucas were bewildered. Laura broke the silence, saying, "Mom said you tricked us and married this woman." Lucas seconded her. That's when Amy started narrating my version of the story, explaining how I was left to die, abandoned by Susan and even the children. She encouraged me to narrate the entire story. I showed them the picture of my damaged car and a few pictures of my recovery journey. The children were utterly confused and started countering by repeating what Susan had told them. But Amy kept calm and reassured them that the truth would come out eventually. When I told them about my failed attempts to meet them, Susan had already prepared them to believe I was a liar. They kept justifying Susan's actions. The next morning, I told Amy to drop the topic and let the children enjoy their stay. Amy agreed but reiterated that the children deserved to know the truth. When Amy went to her office, I took the children to my mother's shop. They connected well with my mother, and it was a joy to see them talk freely with her. We had ice cream and lunch together. Laura and Lucas started to loosen up. I brought them to the place where I met Amy. My children have a creative side, so they liked the place and its decoration. I felt a bit relaxed and hopeful. As the days passed, the children became more comfortable. We took them to events, our favorite restaurants, and places they enjoyed. They started opening up about their school life, hobbies, and interests. Amy suggested taking them to the hospital where I was admitted after my accident. Initially hesitant, the children agreed. I showed them my medical records and shared my painful journey. I refrained from mentioning Susan. The children were quiet, but I could see empathy in their eyes. A week before their return, Lucas asked me directly, "Did Mom really abandon you?" I took a deep breath and recounted the entire story. I showed them old messages where Susan had threatened and insulted me. Laura was teary-eyed, while Lucas looked angry. They didn't speak much after that. I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. On their last night, we had a heart-to-heart conversation. Laura asked why I didn't fight for them earlier. I explained my financial and physical limitations. Lucas said, "Mom always told us you didn't care for us, but now I see the truth." Laura hugged me and cried. They both apologized for their initial behavior. I reassured them it wasn't their fault. The next day, as I dropped them at the airport, I felt a sense of closure. They promised to stay in touch and visit again. I hugged them tightly, feeling a weight lifted off my shoulders. It was a roller coaster of emotions, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to reconnect with my children. I hope to rebuild our relationship and create new memories together. Update 2. Hi all, I have another update. After my children returned to Susan, she called me, furious. She accused me of brainwashing the children against her. I calmly told her they deserved to know the truth. She threatened to cut off all contact between the children and me. I was prepared for this and had already discussed it with my lawyer. He assured me Susan couldn't legally prevent me from seeing my children. I kept in touch with Laura and Lucas through texts and calls. They shared their daily lives and started confiding in me. Susan tried to control their communication with me, but they found ways to stay in touch. One day, Laura called me crying. She said Susan had been harsh and controlling ever since they returned. She felt trapped and wanted to live with me. I immediately contacted my lawyer, who advised me to file for full custody. The court proceedings were tough. Susan's lawyer painted me as a manipulative liar. But my lawyer presented solid evidence, including testimonies from Laura and Lucas. The judge ruled in my favor, granting me full custody of my children. Susan was devastated and tried to appeal, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. Laura and Lucas moved in with us. It was an adjustment for everyone, but we were happy to be together. Amy and my mother welcomed them with open arms. We started family therapy to help with the transition and healing process. It's been a year since they moved in. We've had our ups and downs, but we've grown closer as a family. Laura and Lucas are thriving in their new school and have made new friends. We celebrate their achievements and support each other through challenges. I'm grateful for the second chance to be a father to my children. Amy, my mother, and I work together to provide a loving and supportive home. We've created new traditions and memories, healing the wounds of the past. Thank you all for your support and advice.